Let's play a game. All you have to do is answer the following questions. What month is Black History Month? What month is Women's History Month? What month is LGBTQ Pride Month? And what month is Neurodiversity Awareness Month? The answers, respectively, are February, March, June, and April. Now, how many of those did you get correct? Chances are you knew the answers to the first 3 questions, but not the last one. And it's probably not your fault. It's an indictment of society. But I am fucking sick of society's complete and utter ignorance of neurodivergent people and the shit that we have to deal with on a daily basis. You could go ahead and tell me that neurodivergent awareness is gaining momentum around the world. So what? When most people view neurodivergent awareness as the mere acknowledgement of our existence and struggles, that's not awareness. That's virtue signaling at best. That's especially true when you consider that many of the people who claim to support us take actions that inadvertently contribute to the very struggles we experience the very next moment. The so-called quote-unquote awareness that neurotypical people claim to have about people like us is goddamn pathetic. For example, the very parents who claim to love their neurodivergent children for who they are end up taking them to applied behavioral analysis, or ABA therapy, the very next second. A therapy that was specifically designed to encourage masking and eliminate autistic behaviors. Your manager, who makes a whole presentation about neurodivergent folks at work, then continues to insist that nothing is wrong with the job interview process, which is notorious for putting people like us at a massive disadvantage. I'm not going to forget the person who claims to be on our side, then goes like, "Oh, I'm a little bit OCD about this," while completely dismissing the magnitude of OCD and the plight that it has caused other people. I need to say it louder for the people in the back. If you claim to be aware of us, then proceed to do things that you weren't aware could harm us, then you are not aware of us. Period. I think most of you mean well, but that does not suffice. Saying that you support us is kind, but it does not suffice. If you really did support us, you would learn about us with the information available. You would critically think about the effects of your actions on us. And you would challenge the widespread social behaviors and practices that have made life needlessly painful for us. Let me just give you a handful of examples of how neurotypical adults, no matter how much they have claimed to be on our side, have caused or enabled collateral damage to my community. Example 1. I've had OCD for what I surmise to be most of my life. I definitely exhibited some common OCD behaviors at around the age of 13, yet I never had any idea that I should get evaluated for OCD until the symptoms became unbearable. When I finally got diagnosed with OCD, it had devolved to a severe state, and it has been very difficult for me to live a life with a manageable amount of stress since then, despite the fact that I have dedicated extensive time to therapy and recovery efforts. In my opinion, this happened because the trusted neurotypical adults in my life, including my parents, not only did not do a good enough job of stressing the importance of having conversations about how we're feeling and what kinds of struggles we're going through, but the popular perception of OCD colossally misrepresents what the disorder really is and the magnitude of the damage it causes to people. And because of this, people commonly think that it's all about being neat and tidy to an excessive degree. People think that it's an eccentric quirk rather than a destructive mental illness that wreaks havoc every waking moments of someone's life. Like I previously mentioned, you even have people who trivialize the disorder and say, I'm a little bit OCD about this, when there is something that they have to have a particular way. Because of the poor education about OCD and neurodiversity in general, the popular perception of OCD is woefully inadequate at best and massively deleterious at worst. With better education around OCD, I could have started recovering much earlier, and I could have stopped some bad habits that have taken years off my life while also preventing the OCD from becoming much worse. Example 2. When I first interviewed for an internship position roughly 7 years ago, it was my second year of college. I was denied for what the interviewers considered social ineptitude and poor mannerisms. I had a professor that I knew at the time whine to them, and they begrudgingly accepted me into the internship program, which included very limited interaction with other people, at most. Yet interviews are still the ubiquitous litmus test that it is a primary determinant of whether people get jobs or don't get jobs, even though the people who aren't the best with elocution, calmness in social settings, and so-called quote-unquote social etiquette often make great employees, while those who are sociable often fail in their roles. Only a handful of the interviewers that I have ever met have asked about my neurodivergence beforehand, and those were the only ones that offered accommodations to me before the interview even began. By the way, those people that did, they were specifically looking for neurodivergent people to hire. And they were sometimes neurodivergent themselves. But this widespread refusal to ask interviewees about anything that could potentially hinder their ability to interview, as well as the refusal to give those people accommodations, is why so many people who are neurodivergent miss out on roles that they were a great fit for. And that's why I think that this is the kind of systemic mechanism that needs to be burned at once. Example 3. So, in one of my jobs, my boss told me to implement one of her projects with another organization, or what she called a service site. And the people who were in charge of me at the service site didn't offer to accommodate me, but they instead put me into an extremely deadline-oriented, fast-paced, yet very bureaucratic 9-to-5 role. And when I wasn't productive for 8 hours a day, and I began to miss deadlines, those people began to scold me because they perceived that I was lazy. And that left me no choice but to tell them about my neurodivergence and demand avoidance, which is a core feature of neurodivergence that is often described as the tendency to avoid everyday demands and basically anything that presents modest difficulty. I told them that I had no control over this and that this was just the way that my body worked, and for that reason I was struggling in their work environment. Although I never really had the best of relationships with those people, I do feel like that once I came out to them, they began to support me better, and we had a better relationship. Even then, I still felt like their first instinct was to reprimand me rather than ask me questions and have me play by their rules instead of cooperating with me on a more productive work environment for me. And you wonder why so many neurodivergent people end up struggling and feeling exhausted in their roles. It's because of shit like this. Example 4. Now this one didn't happen to me personally, although I witnessed it, and I've been in situations like these before. It's a very common theme for neurodivergent people. And it's this: the second you appear to not be neurotypical, people who are will jump to their automatic preconceived notions about you and then start distancing themselves from you. This is the neurotypical person's first instinct instead of, asking questions and trying to get to know you better. So there was this time where I was playing recreational volleyball and I was having a drink with some of my teammates afterwards. And much of the conversation that they were having was about this one teammate who almost never said a word. And they told me, well, I don't ask him to hang out after games because he just seems antisocial. Like, he doesn't want to talk. He doesn't really want to be friends with us. And I really should have said something then and there. I didn't, and I'm still pissed about it. Almost everyone needs to do a better job of speaking up, myself included. But back to the story. Even if what they were saying could have been true, I felt so much anger going through me at that very moment. And why? It's because these pathetically short-sighted and often inaccurate assumptions effectively destroy any chances neurodivergent people have of making friendships and thus experiencing better, more fulfilling lives. Holistic people who claim to support those with autism and other forms of neurodivergence do this all the time. I've been the quietest one in a group several times. Just because people are not outgoing does not mean that they feel grouchy towards others. It does not mean that they don't want to be friends either. Perhaps they are just too nervous or too overstimulated by a crowded environment with people blaring shitty music. But instead of asking that quiet teammate questions, those people tried to distance themselves from him because of preconceived notions. You don't have to be friends with me or even like me. You don't have to have a conversation with me if you don't want to. But the fact that people immediately rule out the possibility of checking in on me simply because their preconceived notions tell them not to do so, that's not what supportive individuals do. I have a problem with that. But let's move on. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that a greater exposure and conversation about Neurodiversity Awareness Month will be enough to truly make neurotypical dominated society help us in meaningful ways, let alone solve all of our problems. I feel like opportunistic people and companies use Black History Month, Women's History Month, and Pride Month as a means to virtue signal and say, hey, I support you, without contributing anything meaningful to destroying the societal attitudes and systemic barriers that prevent these groups of people from truly living great lives. This is why I have a tendency to be skeptical of those who proclaim their support for the neurodivergent community. I mean, it's nice to hear that you support us, but I want you to actually, if you're one of these people, I want you to actually support us. Now, with all of that said, I don't think that there is any possibility of anything changing if we as neurodivergent people continue to stay silent. I'm sorry if you are a person of color and I offend you here. I'm really sorry. But from my experience, there is at least a conversation about systemic racism and what could possibly be done about it. I don't think that the conversation is nearly enough to solve your plight. But to me, at least that conversation exists. There's at least talk. I don't see that with systemic ableism. This has to fucking stop, and now. Which is why we should maybe not call April Neurodiversity Awareness Month. We should call it Take Legitimate Action to Make Neurodivergent Lives Better Month. I mean, yeah, that name could use some tweaking. It could sound more concise. But I'd rather have that name than one that encourages people to pay only lip service to us while not making any real efforts to change themselves and the way society is structured.